In November of 1997, while most of my classmates were discovering Korn, Limp Bizkit, Coal Chamber, and the Deftones, something very different was happening at my house. Almost as if by providence or by the scheduling power of the program director at MTV, one day after school I was presented with a video and music style I couldn't resist. This was the day Metallica came into my house for good. The year was 1997, and I was just an unassuming kid from Mechanicsville, a small town outside of Richmond, Virginia. American pop culture was nearing its pinnacle, and I was firmly ensconced in the meat grinder that was public school in the 1990s. The songs, the fashions, the trends, the sports. But then, something happened that would alter the course of my life. Lurking late in that year, on November 18th, was a new and cool album I had to own. It was Reload by Metallica. Seeping into my subconscious for over a year now was Metallica's new album Cycle. At the time, I would listen to the radio a lot because, well, I need to back up a bit. When I grew up, metal was implicitly not allowed in my house. Anything that was counterculture to the late 80s, early 90s aesthetics or ideas was strictly off limits. I remember seeing bands and thinking they were cool, or the shirts looked cool, but wondering what these bands sounded like. As I leveled up into high school in 1996, my folks had a harder time keeping a lid on pop culture's creep towards degeneration, and truly trying to keep the same moral and ethical standards as the late 80s Full House era. But this was 10 years on, and society was growing tired of the saccharine sweetness of the 80s. People were yearning for something a little darker, a little heavier. So I digress. I would listen to the radio a lot, so there was someone to blame if Dad came in asking what I was listening to. Just the radio, Dad. They usually don't play this stuff. But they did usually play this stuff. Tons of bands were getting their swing at the big leagues in the post-grunge boom time of heavy blues rock. Bands you love, and bands you've likely forgotten. But on the radio, this distinctive growling type of singing kept cutting through the airwaves. Occasionally, the DJ would even come back on the microphone and tell you who these bands were. I was enamored. This was all new to me, starting previously in 1996. So by 1997, I really think that I've got this pop culture thing figured out. I've gotten to high school, finally made friends that I see after school. I started acting in plays and appearing on the morning announcements at school, which was a CCTV broadcast where the kids in the communications class would have their chance to be a real television producer, director, talent, or camera person. I absolutely loved this class and got to be on camera for the whole school a few times a month to read the announcements. It's not like I was insanely popular or killing it with the ladies, but I was doing pretty good. One fateful day, I was sitting in front of the family's floor model television listening to that one amazingly sweetly toned speaker pump out the songs on MTV. Then I saw a strange video with these guys in all black spinning around in a sled, looking, I gotta say, pretty freaking cool. The video starts out in a pedestrian way. Here comes the band to pay a strange old lady to ride on a spinning sled to play their heavy metal song. Everything is green. Lars is dressed like Ross from Friends. Literally everything they are wearing besides Kirk's leather pants is directly what the kids at my school were wearing in late 1997. Never mind the fact that these guys are in their early to mid 30s at this point and have toured the world playing some of the most ferocious metal ever heard at the time. They were just like me. I longed for this video the way a man longs for a woman. I just had to see it every day. It needed to be the #1 song in America. When the next single from Reload came out months later, I was furious they had the gall to stop playing The Memory Remains. I started to wonder, however, what it would be like to be a guy that listened to metal. I saw all these other kids at school. They were really cool looking, had cool shirts, and were generally badass. I definitely wanted to do that. So on a chance, I asked for Metallica Reload as a secret Santa gift for when my extended family came to town. To this day, I don't know who exactly got it for me, but I was stoked. I couldn't wait to see the pictures. I couldn't wait to read the lyrics. I opened the lyric book to find these half pages of a few lines of lyrics written in pen by James Hetfield. I have to say that this Metallica Reload is the most late period back to school 1997 thing in the world. The videos are green. They're wearing the same I'm a Skater or maybe Smashing Pumpkins fan or not clothes that tons of kids wore at the time. Lars had Matrix glasses before they were cool. I took Reload home and absolutely stomped a mud hole in it and walked it dry. Day after day, after school, all of my other albums faded into the background. I had a metal album now, by a real metal band. The strange thing is, my family, which is about as metal as a loaf of white bread, even they knew that Metallica had quote-unquote calmed down, in my sister's words. Even this stripped down, lukewarm version of Metallica, they still got me into metal. And I know, for absolute facts, there are other metal people, just like me, that came into metal on Reload or similar panned albums. Yes, no one wants to admit it. Everyone lies. I was listening to Morbid Angel when I was 4 years old, was one of the biggest metal lies I've ever heard. And yes, someone did really say that. People will do anything to not admit they got hooked in by a crappy album. It's just not a very cool way to start your metal journey. I actually think Reload is a great album, which owes to the principle that your first is your favorite, which can apparently be a placeholder for the term I will now introduce, which will be called Rico's Law. The first album will almost always be your all-time favorite or will be near and dear to your heart, while it may receive broad criticism from others. This also coincides with the Reload Law, which states, if your first album in your chosen genre is widely panned by your peers, it is common to obfuscate the truth and even replace your real first album with something considered much cooler. But me, I would never ever do this. So now I was an official metalhead. Or was I? I certainly hadn't changed the way I dressed or my haircut. The group of friends I hung out with didn't really change. Not at first, anyway. It seemed like business as usual, except I had a really cool new type of music to explore. The only problem was the exploration cost $10 to $20 a piece. So these had to be calculated, surgical strikes. Not just flailing in the dark, picking stuff with cool album art. That would come later. For now, I laser focused on Metallica's discography. I know they used to be heavier, maybe even faster. But believe me when I say, as a 15-year-old kid with no computer, just MTV and the local radio, finding underground or old music was a task, and you had to basically know what you were looking for. So there I was at the mall, at the Wall. No, really, there was a record store called The Wall at the mall. In Christmas 1997, the mall was packed with thousands of shoppers, and myself and my mother crammed into the small vertical aisles of this music store with the other holiday patrons. I dashed off for the Metallica section, or whatever, I'm a kid, and there it is, black cover, red writing, huge and pointy Metallica logo, the real logo. The album says, "Kill 'em all," with a white square with a silhouette of a man's arm holding a sledgehammer and a blood stain on the ground. An image, while not particularly gory, definitely was going to set the tone for the listening experience to come. I look up at my mother with what I assume were those Disney eyes that are much too large for a normal head and say, "Can I keep it, Mom?" Mom gives a pause, scans the album cover, reads the words. Probably imagines 1,000 futures where I'm either dead or in jail, or dead in jail. And then, for some unexplained reason, she relents. Maybe it was the heat shooting out from under her coat as the thermostat was set to absolute hellfire in the mall, as was a common practice in those times. For whatever reason that day, she gives in, and I go home and pop in the absolutely legendary thrash metal album that for all intents and purposes started it all in the Bay Area. It was late at night when we got home, so I had to keep the volume low. As soon as the music to Hit the Lights starts, my mind is completely in shambles. Holy moly, did I just hear this guitar riff? Am I hearing this absolute metal insanity in my room right now? I am patiently awaiting the low grumbly growl that 1997 James Hetfield is known for, and holy crap, he sounds like a chipmunk. When I got Kill 'Em All home, I loved the music, but it took many listens to get used to the screaming, more trebly and shouty James. After all, about 2 months ago I was listening to the Counting Crows or something, so this was an absolute insanity being shouted at my developing brain. I eventually got used to it, and of course, I absolutely loved it. For Christmas, I put in an emergency order for the 2 other albums by Metallica I definitely knew existed: Load and Ride the Lightning. On Christmas Day, I got both of those, and a poorly timed first 2 Foo Fighters albums, which may not have gotten listened to. On Christmas Day, the first thing I did was go to my room and listen to Ride the Lightning. Holy shit. Every song, absolutely every song, was a masterpiece, directly speaking to my angst-filled teenage brain. The rest of the year was N64, Metallica, Pizza Hut, and Pepsi. I didn't really listen to Load that much, and by then the questions were already forming in my head a mere month after discovering the band. Hey, why'd they get rid of the awesome logo? Why'd they cut off all their hair and stop dressing like metalheads and start dressing like 10th graders? Why doesn't the guitar go brrrr anymore? I wanted to know the reason for this, and also, I had to track down those other Metallica albums. But that wouldn't happen until 1998. In 1998, I got a drum set in April and started my first ever band with the help of 4 of my schoolmates in August, all the while getting deeper into the metal rabbit hole at the absolute concern of my parental units. But I suppose that's another story for another time. See you guys next time. Subscribe for more metal stories.